Yo, what's up guys? So today we're going to be showcasing off a really cool Infernity variant. This one is going to be called the Cherubini Infernity. What it revolves all around is basically a bunch of level 3 monsters to specifically summon Cherubini. Once you make this Infernities, if this card effect goes off, you basically win the game. And that is because you're going to have so many negates where your opponent literally cannot Yugioh. And you might say, well, what if they have Dark Ruler no more? Well, you can negate that because, well, Infernity Archfiend will search out a card called Barrier, which can negate that card. The one exception would be to get Nibiru, but let's be honest here, Nibiru just destroys most combo decks anyways, and depending on the time that they activate it, you can still maybe play through it. Again, it just depends on the circumstances that it is used on. But nonetheless, you're going to be able to consistently throw out enough negates to where your opponent can't play, but the first combo over here is going to be overkill. It's a 10 negate combo, which basically makes most decks, again, just lose outright over here. But like I said, even if you was to maybe Nibiru at certain intervals, Instant Fusion can still let you kind of combo and go off. The one real downside to this deck would technically be going second, because going second means your opponent has made a combo, and while you are playing Infernities, it's not the great idea to play hand traps because, well, they're stuck in your hand. The one exception would be maybe throwing in Impermanence, because that card could obviously be just set and then you're good to go, and you can still kind of activate that card from your hand. So I think it can be okay for that. There's a couple other hand traps that maybe you can utilize where you would like discard and your opponent would, every time they special summon, you'd get life points. But Dogwood isn't really that relevant. But for the most part, the most important thing really here is that it opens up good, and you could still maybe deal with a board that your opponent has, but again, if your opponent has multiple negates, there isn't really a great out to it, but that's just kind of how some duels are. So anyways, we've got 4 negates with the Appaloosa, we've got 2 more here, so that's 6, and then we've got 7, 8, 9, and 10 over here. This one is more of a disruption, the Infernity Break, than a negate, but it's basically 10, you get rid of 10 cards, and that's pretty much game over. We didn't even need to use one effect of the Appaloosa over here, but that's totally fine because it's already game over anyway. So the first tool over here, the poor Dark World player couldn't play at all. But what if they happen to have a different hand? Let's go ahead and check out what you can do with this deck with specifically just Tour Guide. Lets you go right into the Rhino. And what I like with the Tour Guide is it does definitely bait out potential other hand traps, and then you can go ahead and just summon another card, whether that be the Dangers, the Gillosaurus, or any of the other cards in this deck, which can grant you easy access to, once again, Cherubini, because I think a lot of people would probably try to stop Tour Guide, and that would not be the play. There's actually a lot of different things that you could hit in this deck, just in case you guys want to know kind of how to counter the deck. Hitting Cherubini can be pretty big, but they can still combo after that, because that card is just sending the Necromancer most of the time to the graveyard, which will then start bringing back, of course, the Archfiend over and over again. But it's kind of difficult to determine what hand your opponent has, so you don't know exactly what to hit all the time. But I can tell you hitting Saryuja is probably not a bad idea either, because that card does let them cycle quite a bit. But before they go into Saryuja, sometimes they will set a card that is another combo extension. So again, you'd have to have multiple hand traps to really just put the nail in the coffin against this deck, because all of the older Yu-Gi-Oh cards have this effect where they don't have it, say, like once per turn. Like, that's why the whole Infernity deck was kind of nerfed, so to speak, a long time ago, was because the cards were just way too strong, having so many copies of Archfiends. And well, Barrier was technically hit, but that didn't really matter. They were still, in fact, what's funny is once they got hit, they started doing better. But for the most part, again, Necromancer and Archfiend are the cards you're going to be utilizing, going over and over again and getting all those effects. But here, once again, a Break is going to go ahead and say no to that, but he's still got a Danger Monster that's going to go ahead and get completely stopped outright. But there isn't really a deck that I would say has a good matchup against this deck too, because this board is just way too strong for most things to deal with. Again, the only instance is maybe Super Poly, but even then, you're looking at still a tough board to beat, because even though you Super Poly, you've got to go ahead and discard 1 card, so that's at least 2, and then you got to deal with the multiple copies of Barriers. But that's unless, of course, you're using your ability to get rid of Archfiend, and then you still happen to have this. It's a really tough battle for most decks to, again, deal with. Now, this time, we're going to see a mirror match over here. We're going to see how this plays out. But I'd say this deck is relatively consistent, because, again, all you need to do is just special summon and go right into the Cherubini, and then you're pretty much good to go. So that's how the deck has instant access to consistency, and then we're also utilizing Cloth or Cross Sheep, as it's called now, in the TCG. But this card is still super expensive, so we're going to go ahead and see him special summon Archfiend, and then you guys already know what happens with this. This card, don't even need the effect. That's how good it is. But there is a bonus effect if you happen to go for a Void. You can make it so you can boost up everything. All monsters you control gain 700 attack, which can be nice, but it doesn't really matter for the most part. It's just another stepping stone that you can go ahead and really utilize. But in the off chance if you want to play Super Poly, because you do need disruptions, and I think that Super Poly could be an okay-ish option, because not only does that discard a card, but it lets you get rid of boards, and it would help the deck have a little bit more consistency with being able to go second, because again, that's the only downside with this deck, is really going second. But once again, Necromancer, bringing back the boy Archfiend, add back the barrier, utilize him as material, 100 eyes copying the Mirage, bring back your Necromancer, bring back Avenger, and then this card going to be bringing back Infernity Archfiend again, barrier, and it's good. Alright, so we've got this is right here. We got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 negates, which pretty much just makes a game for most duels anyways. And again, I think barrier is just so key, because a lot of people still utilize the Dark Ruler No More, which I guess they would kind of side deck out of, but Nibiru is still a very great card against this deck. But sometimes, again, they might just set that Instant Fusion as the back row. They have Launcher as the back row. Sometimes you might not be able to hit it at the right moment, and if they happen to hit it too late, maybe you can use another card to go ahead and stop that from going through. But nonetheless, that's going to go ahead and be game once again. But I want to show you guys a few different duels so you guys can kind of see how it can indeed open up and play. This guy's actually utilizing one card that I think is kind of underrated here. This is Curse of the Shaddoll Prison. So each time a Shaddoll monster is sent to the graveyard, you get to place a Spellstone counter on it, and then each stone on it makes it so your opponents lose 100 attack for each Spellstone counter on this card. But the only important part is during your opponent's turn only is that effect, by the way, where they lose the stats, which is kind of mediocre. Again, that stat doesn't really matter. But each time you fusion summon a Shaddoll monster, you can remove 3 Spellstone counters from this card and use one appropriate face-up monster your opponent controls as one of the fusion materials. This could be a card that someone might want to instantly negate, because they might just see it and be like, oh, I don't want him to go ahead and start using, you know, the ability to use my monsters as materials. It does take a while to get started. That's why most people opted not play it, because Yu-Gi-Oh has gotten to the point where it's a very fast game, and you need to be able to either OTK your opponent or disrupt them to the point where they can't play. Where this card, you could still technically use it, because its effect isn't like once per turn where you can only place one counter, but it will require you to utilize other cards, and if you have a bad hand, this only makes it worse. If you have a good hand, though, you can kind of play out of things, and again, it could be a good bait card instantly to make your opponent negate it, but there's probably better bait cards, like, of course, Lightning Storm is very popular, and on top of that, you'll have cards like Dark Ruler No More that just force your opponent to basically give you control over the game. But once again, this one is going to be a really nasty board over here, because he had Levier play to go ahead and bring back Mirage. Mirage is still an excellent card. Again, it's just so good to be able to go ahead and keep on using those cards over and over again. In this instance, we've got 4, 5 negates, and then 6, 7, 8, 9. So again, it's a consistent 8 negates, I would say, for the most part, because if you really open up bad, yeah, you could maybe make this go down to 3 negates, but if you have 3 negates this and then triple barrier plus break, that's enough. That's 7. Like, you really don't need more than 6 negates anyways, because your opponent only starts out with 6 cards, unless they Phantaz you, which I guess, yeah, at that point, maybe they've drawn an extra card, and then at that point, you needed the extra negate. But for the most part, you should be a-okay on most of the duels. And now that you guys have seen it in action, I want to give you guys the deck profile over here, so let's go ahead and hop right into it. So, we did cover Dangerous Shaddolls a while back, but the thing that makes this deck so much better is really just the ability to go for a Cherubini, and that's why it's called Cherubini Infernity. Shouts to my boy AzneyesWhitedragon for hooking me up with the play, because it's his build, and I think it's pretty cool because I have not seen anyone try to really focus in on trying to utilize it, and it also uses, of course, number 60 to go ahead and be able to get that effect where you're able to special summon a monster in your graveyard in defense position. So that's a great use of it in Infernities. But anyways, here's the deck profile, guys. So we got 1 copy of Danger Nessie, 1 copy of Archfiend, 2 copies of Mothman, 3 copies of the Street Patrol, 2 copies of the Chupacabra, 1 copy of the Patriarch, 3 copies of the Fiendish Rhino Warrior, 3 copies of Gillosaurus. You got to watch out with this card though, just as a heads up, because this deck is pretty much wanting to go first anyways. But if you happen to go second, your opponent can still also special summon a monster from their graveyard, which is usually a bad thing in this deck. I mean, if you go in first, again, it doesn't matter, which is the point of this deck anyways. Then we have 2 copies of the Dander Tsuchinoko, 2 copies of Tour Guide, 1 copy of the Archfiend Hyras, 2 copies of the Psychic Wielder over here. So this just makes so if you control a level 3 monster other than itself, you get to special summon it from your hand. And then the other effect, it doesn't really matter. 2 copies of Jackalope, 1 copy of Necromancer, because you can recycle it because the effect is not once per turn, then 1 copy of Avenger, and then 3 copies of Mirage, 3 copies of Allure, 3 copies of Instant Fusion, 1 copy of 1-for-1, 1 Upstart, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Reborn, 1 Into the Void, 3 copies of Void Calamity. So let's you discard a card and then send a Fiend monster from your deck to the graveyard, which is obviously really good. And then also you can send this face-up card in the field, the graveyard, to send it Inferno monsters, but we don't have Infernoids, this is Infernities. It's just that first effect that where you're able to not only get rid of a card, then maybe Procket's effect, but also just send 1 Fiend. So this is where I was saying before, where if your opponent Nibiru's you too earlier, they negate 1 thing, or even 2 things, because you can go Tour Guide, they can negate Tour Guide, you can go Special Summon Gillosaurus, and then go for, let's say, a Cherubini. You get Cherubini's effect negated, hit up Void Calamity, bam, you're really ready to go. I would say you can play through 2 negates perfectly fine in most circumstances. Playing through 3, depending on what they're stopping, like if they stop this, it could be pretty big, but again, they do happen to have multiple follow-up plays, so it's just really difficult to say what you need to stop because you don't know what your opponent has in their hand. And then of course we have the Infernity Launcher, then we've got Infernity Break, and then 3 copies of Barrier. So that's basically your 4 negate that you're going to be able to consistently get. Appaloosa is obviously really good. I mean, this card always gets stopped by kaijus and stuff, but the thing that is so great with this, and one thing I want to mention, is they have to have a face-up attack person Infernity monster for Barrier. So you could literally tribute, like instead of going for the Appaloosa if you have a kaiju, maybe getting rid of the Archfiend or whatever Infernity that they end with an attack position, because usually people will put other cards in defense mode because they're like, well, it's got 0 attack. But sometimes it's better just take the damage with your Necromancer or whatever Infernity monster that you have there. Leave multiple attack positions, because if that one guy gets kaiju'd, then you could lose out on all your barriers. All 3 of your barriers are now completely dead. So just keep that in mind as well. It's better just to take the damage. Usually, it's very rare that your opponent will be able to go ahead and OTK one-shot you, get 8,000 damage on. As long as you have those barriers, you can usually stop the combos. I know that there's some circumstances where they can't, like some of the Sacred Beasts, right? But as far as extra goes, we got the Mud Dragon, Zombie Warrior, Trishula, 2 copies of Void Ogre, 200 eyes, 1 copy of number 60, 1 Leviair, 3 copies of Yugioh, 1 Appaloosa, Cloth, or Cross Sheep as it's called in the TCG, and of course Cherubini for Cherubini Infernities. But one suggestion I could give for this deck, in case any of you guys want to mess around with it, I think you could definitely get away with just running 2 of these if you want to. As far as other suggestions, obviously a target for Super Poly would be good. If you want to go and throw in maybe like 1 Super Poly, since you can only activate 1 Instant Fusion per turn, you could drop this down to 2 if you want to as well. That could be another option, just because otherwise it's just a dead card, which of course with this effect you can get rid of any dead card too. But I'm just thinking that like going second would make this deck so much better. If you have Impermanence would be a great addition, because that's another negate too, right? If you open up with Impermanence and you're still going first, that's an extra negate, and if you're going second, at least you can maybe stop your opponents from going off and disrupting your play. So I think Impermanence is just an overall great card, and I think 2 Impermanence in this deck would not be a bad idea. And as far as what I would cut, since this is a once per turn, it's such an important card, to be honest. I think if you want to, you can take a look at options, because this card is terrible going second too, because you're giving unless your opponent sets 1 monster pass, which never happens, right? I think double Impermanence could be a great addition to this as well. But anyways, those are my thoughts on it. You guys can let me know yours down below. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like on it. If you are new to the channel, hit subscribe, turn on that bell so you don't miss out on new Yu-Gi-Oh videos. And Infernities will always still be a very strong deck. I mean, we're talking lots of times you're going to be able to negate every single card that your opponent has, because you're looking at 10 negates with a good hand, and with a mediocre hand, you still have usually 6 to 8 and all just comes down to the access to Cherubini, really. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys, and if you guys want to send me other replays like my boy AzneyesWhitedragon, feel free to send in the replays as well as the YDK file to AzneyesReplays@gmail.com. I love to see what you guys in the community can make, and if you guys want to check out Stardust, I'll leave them pinned down below. But thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a good one, and peace.